Hey everyone, welcome back to the Urbanist Lens. I'm Drew and excited to dive into a fascinating aspect of city life with you today.
And I'm Andrea, thrilled to be back with you all.
Now, Andrea, before we get into today's topic, I have to hear more about that weekend getaway you were telling me about. You were practically glowing when you got back.
Oh, it was a whirlwind trip to Savannah, Georgia. I was a little worried about navigating a new city, but it turned out to be so easy to get around. The historic district, with its cobblestone squares and charming architecture, felt so distinct from the Victorian district with its ornate homes. Even without a map, I always felt oriented.
That's interesting because just last week I spent a day wandering around Boston, and I swear I ended up in the same confusing roundabout at least 3 times. It made me think some cities just seem easier to understand than others, don't they?
They absolutely do. And that's a perfect segue into our topic today, urban legibility, the art and science of designing cities that are easy to navigate and understand.
Okay, I'm intrigued. So are we talking about cities that are like super organized with perfect grids and tons of signs?
Well, it's not just about grids and signs, though those are definitely part of it. It's more about creating a city where people can form a clear mental map, a kind of internal GPS that helps them understand the city's layout and find their way around.
So like how you were describing Savannah's distinct districts, it sounds like those acted as mental landmarks for you.
Exactly. A legible city provides you with these visual and spatial cues that help you create a mental map, even if you've never been there before. Think about a city like Paris. You've got the Seine River snaking through it, the Eiffel Tower as a prominent landmark, distinct neighborhoods like Montmartre with its artistic vibe. All these elements work together to create a sense of place and make it easy to orient yourself.
You know, it's funny because I never really thought about it that way, but it makes so much sense. When I think of cities that I've enjoyed exploring, they tend to have those easily recognizable features you're talking about.
It's often the subconscious elements of design that have the biggest impact on our experience. Luckily for us, there's a framework for understanding all of this. It comes from a book called The Image of the City by Kevin Lynch. He was an urban planner who basically pioneered the concept of urban legibility back in the 1960s.
So what did this Kevin Lynch guy have to say about designing cities that are easy to understand? Did he have some secret formula?
Well, not a secret formula exactly, but he did identify 5 key elements that contribute to a city's legibility path: edges, districts, nodes, and landmarks.
5 elements. All right, let's break those down so I can start seeing my city through this urbanist lens.
Let's start with paths. These are the routes we use to move around a city street's walkways, even transit lines. Think of it like the city's circulatory system. A well-designed path system is clear, connected, and easy to follow.
Okay, that makes sense. What about those edges you mentioned?
Edges are the boundaries that define different areas within a city. They can be natural features like a river or a coastline, or man-made ones like highways or even walls. They act as visual breaks in the cityscape, often framing a view or creating a sense of enclosure.
So edges are like the lines on a map that separate different zones. That helps to create a mental picture in my mind. But what exactly makes a district in this context? We've been throwing that word around a bit.
Districts are all about character and identity. They are areas within a city that have a recognizable feel, whether it's because of a particular architectural style, the types of businesses there, or even a certain cultural vibe. Like Savannah's historic district with its cobblestone squares and horse-drawn carriages, it transports you to another time.
I'm starting to see how these pieces fit together. Paths are how we get around edges, are the boundaries and districts, are these areas with unique personalities. But what about the nodes you mentioned?
Nodes are the energy centers of a city, the points where paths intersect or where activity is concentrated. They're often public spaces like squares, plazas, or major transportation hubs that draw people in and act as social gathering places. They're important for orientation because they provide reference points within the city.
It's all under a click. So we've got paths, edges, districts, and nodes. What's the last piece of this urban legibility puzzle?
Ah, yes, landmarks. These are probably the most intuitive of the 5 elements. Landmarks are those prominent features that stand out from their surroundings and provide a sense of place. Think about iconic structures like the Space Needle in Seattle, or even a distinctive natural feature like a mountain peak that can be seen from across the city.
It sounds like these landmarks are kind of like anchors that help us fix our position within a city. So if I understand this correctly, these 5 elements work together to create that mental map in our heads, helping us navigate a city with confidence.
Precisely. And by understanding these elements, we can not only appreciate good urban design, but also start to see how cities can improve their legibility.
So it sounds like just being aware of these 5 elements can already make you a more observant city explorer. But is this knowledge really applicable in the real world? Like, in city planners actually use these ideas to make their cities easier to navigate?
Absolutely. Understanding Lynch's framework isn't just about appreciating beautiful cities. It's a powerful tool for urban designers to create cities that are functional and enjoyable to navigate.
Okay, I'm all ears. Give me some examples of how a city could put these ideas into action.
Well, let's take wayfinding systems, which are basically all the things that help people find their way around signs, maps, those helpful digital kiosks you sometimes see. A city of a well-designed wayfinding system makes it much easier to get around, even if the city's layout isn't perfectly intuitive.
So, like having clear signs that point you in the right direction and maps that are actually easy to understand?
Exactly. There's actually a famous example of this in London. It's called Legible London, and it's a whole initiative focused on improving the city's wayfinding. They've implemented clear and consistent signage throughout the city, making it much easier for both residents and visitors to navigate.
Legible London. I love that. It's like they're taking this whole concept of urban legibility seriously. What else can cities do besides signage?
Remember how we talked about the importance of districts having a unique character? Well, cities can really play that up. Think about preserving the architectural heritage of a particular neighborhood or encouraging businesses that contribute to a distinct vibe.
So it's about making sure each area has a strong sense of identity, kind of like how you were talking about those different districts in Savannah.
Precisely. And it's not just about aesthetics, it genuinely helps with navigation. For example, if you're looking for a cool independent bookstore, you'd probably head towards a district known for its artsy vibe, right?
That makes sense. It adds another layer to those mental maps. What about landmarks? How can cities make those more effective as navigational aids?
Sometimes it's about making sure that landmarks are visible from key points in the city. Think about a city with a stunning skyline, making sure there are parks or open spaces where people can actually see those landmarks is essential. Other times it's about providing context and information. Imagine walking past a historic building and seeing a sign that explains its history and significance. Suddenly it becomes more than just a pretty facade.
It's like giving people a reason to connect with those landmarks, making them more memorable. So we've talked about wayfinding distinct districts and landmark visibility. Anything else cities should be thinking about?
Well, there's also the idea of pathway hierarchy. This is about making sure there's a clear distinction between major routes and smaller local streets. A good example of this is the grid system in Chicago. You always know which streets are the main arteries and which are the side streets.
So it's about creating a sense of order and predictability within the city's layout.
Exactly. And finally, let's not forget about public spaces, parks, plazas. Those little pockets of greenery, they're not just nice to look at, they can actually be powerful navigational aids.
Wait, really? How do parks help with navigation? I always thought of them as places to relax and escape the city bustle.
Of course, they serve that purpose too, but think about it this way. A park creates a visual break in the urban fabric, offering a different perspective on the cityscape. It can also act as a landmark in itself, especially if it has a distinctive design or features.
You know, now that you mention it, some of the parks in my city are actually places I use to orient myself. They're like mental landmarks that help me figure out which direction I need to go in. This is also fascinating, but I have to imagine that maintaining a city's legibility gets pretty tricky as cities grow and change, right?
You're absolutely right. Urban legibility is an ongoing challenge, especially in rapidly developing cities.
What are some of the hurdles cities face in keeping things legible as they evolve? What are some of the hurdles cities face in keeping things legible as they evolve?
Well, one of the biggest challenges is balancing density with clarity. As cities grow more populated, it becomes even more important to make sure there's enough open space and that the pathways remain clear and easy to follow. You don't want everything to become so crowded that it feels overwhelming to navigate.
Yeah, I've definitely been to cities where it feels like you're constantly weaving through a maze of people and buildings. Not exactly a relaxing experience, so how do you avoid that sense of claustrophobia in a dense urban environment?
That's where thoughtful design comes in. It's about creating visual breaks, using contrasting materials and textures to differentiate spaces, and ensuring there's a clear hierarchy in the street network. For instance, wide tree-lined boulevards can act as visual corridors that guide you through the city, while smaller pedestrian-friendly streets create a more intimate and human-scale experience.
So it's about creating a rhythm within the city, using those different types of spaces.
Exactly. And then there's the challenge of incorporating those green spaces we were talking about in a way that actually enhances navigation. While parks can be great landmarks and visual breaks, they need to be well connected to the surrounding streets and pathways to really serve that purpose. You don't want them to feel like isolated islands cut off from the rest of the city.
Yeah, it's like those parks need to be integrated into the flow of the city, almost like beads on a necklace connected by the streets and pathway.
That's a great analogy. And then there's the issue of wayfinding systems becoming outdated. as cities change and evolve, those signs and maps need to be updated too, or they'll just lead people astray.
So cities can't just design for legibility once and then call it a day. It's an ongoing process.
Absolutely. Open legibility is a dynamic process that requires constant attention and adjustment. And of course, we can't forget about the challenges that come with mixed-use development. It's fantastic to have vibrant areas with shops, restaurants, residences, and offices all mixed together, but designing those spaces in a way that feels both lively and legible can be tricky.
So it's about finding that sweet spot where functionality and a sense of place come together harmoniously.
You got it, and that's the challenge and the beauty of urban design. It's about creating spaces that meet our practical needs while also inspiring us, engaging us, and helping us feel connected to the city around us.
Well, this has been an incredibly insightful conversation. I feel like I'm seeing the city with a whole new set of eyes, now noticing details I never paid attention to before.
It's amazing how much we can discover just by being more aware of our surroundings. And once you start to understand these principles of urban legibility, you start to see them everywhere.
So for our listeners out there, what are some key takeaways you hope they walk away with today? What's the essence of urban legibility in a nutshell?
First and foremost, I hope they gain an appreciation for the power of mental maps and how those five elements, paths, edges, districts, nodes, and landmarks shape our understanding of a city.
It's like having a mental toolkit for exploring any city with confidence and curiosity.
Exactly. And secondly, I hope they realize that good urban design isn't just about aesthetics. It's about creating cities that are intuitive, enjoyable, and easy to navigate.
And that creating those legible cities is an ongoing challenge, especially as our urban landscapes continue to evolve.
Absolutely. It's an ongoing conversation and one that we can all participate in by paying attention to our cities, appreciating good design, and advocating for improvements where we see the need.
Well said. This has been such a fascinating deep dive into the world of urban legibility. And for our listeners, we'd love to hear your thoughts. What are some landmarks or districts in your city that stand out to you and help you navigate? Share your insights with us on social media. And until next time, happy exploring.